Hello everyone, Dr. Boulette here, and I wanted to just take a moment to talk to you a little bit more about perceptions and gender and leadership styles. Some of the researchers like Kolb and Engen have indicated in previous research studies that there are really no substantial differences and far more similarities between behaviors of male and female leaders. One of the studies completed by Engen discovered that the styles, between men and women don't show significant gender differences. However, researchers have always found that the perception of the leadership behaviors between men and women are the ones that seem to differ here. Classically, men have been perceived more positive, although they may have displayed the same behavior as female leaders. Research has also shown that people perceive particular traits to be typical for a male leader, such as self-reliance, being independent, being assertive, having actual leadership abilities, being willing to take risks. Males are seen that they make decisions easier. Now remember, it's perception. That they act like a leader, that they are athletic, that they are ambitious, and that they are self-sufficient. And what has been perceived as typical female traits, female leadership traits in women is that they are affectionate, they're cheerful, they're compassionate, that they don't use harsh language, and remember again that this is a perception, that they are loyal, sensitive to the needs of others, that they are sympathetic, gentle, understanding, tender, and warm. Society also perceives that the behavior style of men is more competitive in nature versus the women. They're more competitive. They're perceived as more of wanting to win, more dominating, that they are risk takers, that they're better team players. They're opportunistic, they're impersonal in their work environment, whereas the female style is perceived by society as giving information, being open to ideas, that they're better at building interpersonal relationships, and they encourage effort and subordinate development, and assume personal roles in their work environment. What's also interesting is that sometimes the so-called difficult woman is often perceived as being gruffy and not so pleasant, versus if it's a man who behaves difficult, it's seen as an acceptable aggressiveness in men. So it's interesting that perception, again, the societal perception that the research shows here, that actually highlights or makes those differences in gender and leadership styles. There are tendencies in research that show that stereotypical beliefs are all about men having high agentic or masculine attributes, that they're masterful, independent, assertive, and competent, and women are more communal or typically feminine in their attributes, as we heard, friendly, unselfish, and concerned with others, and emotionally expressive. And again, it's a perception. Another thing that research showed is that women who hold high positions in organizations are actually perceived to be more masculine. Similar to women in a dominant male organizational context, behaving more male. Or if I would allow myself to say, what is perceived by society as male behavior. I really think that different situations will influence a leader's behavior regardless of how he or she is perceived to be. A good leader, I find, is a chameleon, molding and shaping to his or her behavior, molding or shaping his or her behavior to the given situation, to the circumstance, what is called for at that given time and place. And I also believe that the perceptions are very stereotypical, as believed by our society. And I'm sure you may think about that in the same way, thinking about your experiences and your observations. I have seen women with exactly opposite traits than what our perceptive, societal perceptive research has shown here, as I've mentioned earlier. I've seen women, and I have worked with women and experienced with women with opposite traits than what the typical female traits actually are perceived by society, just for the mere fact that they are women. The same holds true for men. I think it's crucial to consider continuous social change in our complex world today. I also consider that the cultural, our cultural past, but also our cultural continuous evolvement and our life experience will also be play a big part in our personal, professional, and continuous social change as a whole. So in other words, social change will change the perceptions about female and female traits and roles in our society over time. Although I do believe that we just love to hold on to the past, namely the classical stereotypical male beliefs and female beliefs and perceptions concerning leadership styles and behaviors. I think we must also consider that culture plays an integral role when it comes to individuals forming those perceptions, expectations, and stereotypical beliefs. It's really important to realize that our perceptions of leadership are really a crucial element in the entire development of emergent leadership. That's pretty much what Kolb says in his study on leadership. Emergent leaders don't hold any titles and can be found at all levels within the organization. It's just like your contemporary is a leader too. Everyone is a leader. You don't have to be in a titled position to be a leader. And if we think about it, the emergent leaders are the only true leaders if they are viewed as a leader by others. Think about that. We also want to think about gender role expectations. They're assumed to arise from the distribution of men and women having different specific social roles. And after we mention the interplay and influence of culture on individual perceptions, those roles will change. And I believe that the development of the perception as far as gender roles are concerned may start as early as childhood. Some of us become conditioned from young on age on what behavior is typical and what is only acceptable for a boy or a girl. And later in life, some of us continue to live with that belief, accepting stereotypical beliefs and perceptions and archetypical stories that we have lived with in the past. But we forget that we're building new ones, and it's good. And of course, we live up to whatever may have been told in the past, and it's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy for some of us out there. So it's important to really reflect on that perception, societal perception, plays a big part in this, and to also embrace the fact that social change is a constant, and we are experiencing that every day. Thank you so much. I look forward to any input you may have on this.